everyone, I'm Elise Thompson-Richards, Associate Editor-in-Chief for Food Engineering Magazine. In this interview, I'm chatting with Jayme Laser, Director of Engineering Supply Chain for Conagra Brands, in recognition of International Women in Engineering Day. Laser shares her college experience, her work with Conagra, and the importance of mentoring young engineers. Let's get into it. And so I'd like to start our conversation essentially from the beginning. How did you get interested in the STEM field and when?
Actually, believe it or not, in high school, I've always been interested in math and science, and my 10th grade chemistry teacher is the one who actually said, with your interest in everything, you should really look into engineering. And so I did, and I started going to workshops for women in engineering at the local colleges and community colleges. And that's where I really fell in love with it and decided that I was going to be an engineer. And believe it or not, I decided I was going to be a mechanical engineer, and that's what I went to college for. And I never changed my major.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'd love to hear about your college experience. Could you describe it for me?
Sure. So I went to Penn State University. I was one of those who wasn't really sure if I wanted to go away or not. So I started at a local branch campus. So I was home for 2 years and then, and got all of my kind of general classes out of the way, if you will. And then I moved up to University Park, main campus for Penn State. And I absolutely loved it. I had a great college experience. Worked really hard. I was always, one of those ones that was jealous looking out my apartment window. You see all the different majors, they're going out there having a good time, and I'm sitting there with my books. So it was definitely a lot of work, but I really enjoyed the experience. I got a great education. And I've been successful since college. I've been in a lot of different fields within engineering. So some different backgrounds, and the college education is really what got me started.
And, thinking about your class makeup, were there a lot of other women students?
Not really. There might have been two or three other ones, if that, in the majority of my classes. I saw more women gravitating more towards civil, structural, industrial engineering. More when you were looking at the mechanical, electrical, chemical, there weren't very many women in those fields.
And did that pose a challenge while you were going through your education?
Um, I don't think it did. I think what it did is it prepared me for the workforce, because engineering, even to this day, is still a male-dominated field. Not saying women can't be successful in it, but it's a male-dominated field. And being in male-dominated classes, it gave me the confidence to not only go up to the different men in my class and ask to join their study groups and work with them, but I developed some really good friendships from there. And then when I got out into the workforce, it gave me the confidence to be able to speak up, to ask questions, to learn, and in a sense, not be intimidated, which I think is very important.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, being involved in a variety of fields. How did you find your way into the food industry?
That's kind of an interesting story. So I actually started out in the power industry. So coming out of college, well, when I was in college, I really gravitated more towards the thermal fluid side of mechanical engineering. I didn't gravitate as much towards the machine side. So I enjoyed more of the process side. And I went on a few interviews, and throughout the course of my interviews, I was interviewing with one company, and the interviewer said, you're really geared more towards the power industry. You should really, with what you like to do, you should check out power. So I did. And coming out of college, I started work for a company that was engineering, procurement, and construction company for basically turnkey power plants. And I did that for a couple years. And then I moved on to an OEM that did heat recovery steam generators. So basically, really large boilers that provided the steam for power plants. And I did that for about 5 years. And while I was doing that, I got my master's in business management. and I got my professional engineering license. And the power industry is very cyclical, and it was on a downturn. I probably was in it for 5 to 7 years, and it was on a downturn. And I said, well, I don't think I was in jeopardy of losing my job, but at the same time, I didn't like the feeling of, the cyclicalness of it and seeing people lose their jobs and then wondering, am I going to be one of those people or not? So I said, well, now's probably a good time in my career if I want to change careers or change fields that I'm in. It's probably a good time. So I started looking and found a job with a design build firm. And that's how I got into the food industry. And I was like, well, people have to eat. So there should always be a need for engineering and food. So went to a company, as I mentioned, that was design build, and they would do design build food manufacturing facilities. And I worked with them for about 5 years, and that's how I actually got to Conagra, in a sense that it was Pinnacle at the time, but was doing a lot of work for them. They really liked the work that I did. And so I moved over and came on board for basically an owner, an end user, um, and held a lot of roles within Pinnacle at the time, from working with R&D on the innovation side and marketing on how do we roll out new products, to moving into a project manager role, and then moving into more of a capital management role. And then with the Conagra Pinnacle acquisition, moved into a role that I'm in now, which for me is a great role, where I have more responsibility for manufacturing facilities when it comes to engineering and working with several of our facilities, the products that they make, developing their capital plan. And I get to work with a lot of great people, which is really nice.
That sounds amazing. And I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the projects that you've been working with, through Conagra. I
Mhm.
understand that you've worked on a vegetable processing facility.
Mhm. Yeah. So one of the most exciting ones I've done, a few years ago, our Waseca, Minnesota facility was kind of an old, outdated facility, and we really wanted to improve on it. So Conagra at the time decided to build a new manufacturing facility that processed frozen peas and corn. So back in probably, I guess it's 2019, 2020 now, we started out on that. I call it an adventure, but started out on that adventure in building that new facility. And I say it's an adventure because if you go back in time, around 2020 is when COVID hit. So not only did we decide to build a new manufacturing facility, we had the challenges of COVID, we had all the supply chain challenges that came with that. And then on top of that, it was a fresh pack facility. So what that means is we bring in the crops from the field and we process them through our facility, and we have to, we have to get them into that end package. And when you're dealing with the fields, you can't miss, because if you bypass a field, there's no chance in getting it back. The crop spoils and you can't go back and harvest it. So we had the challenge of starting that plant up in June of 2020, and basically, doing a vertical startup to where we were ready to receive fields at rate on day one. So it was a big challenge. We did sacrifice in some instances schedule. Schedule was number one because we didn't have another facility to fall back on. So we did sacrifice, some other things like cost for schedule to be able to achieve that. But we did achieve it. We were ready on day one to process peas, which was like mid June. And then corn started early August, and we were ready for corn, and we had a successful season, which was great.
That's incredible. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your direct role within that project. Can you describe the duties that you held?
Sure. So I oversaw the project. So from an engineering standpoint, I basically had responsibility of it. I had a project manager that worked with me and a team of technical experts within Conagra that were also part of the team that did more of what I would call the day-to-day work. But I had overall responsibility as far as, making sure technically scope, schedule, budget, bringing that project in. And really, the team did a lot of great work, and I wanted to support them, remove any barriers for them, help them with any challenges that they had so that they could really move through and execute the project with as little interference as possible. And then also with the challenge of COVID, supply chain challenges, you know, that was also when that big cargo ship got stuck in the Suez Canal and blocked everything from coming to the ports. That was also the time when the government decided to bring home all the troops, and they obviously took precedence at all the ports. So just working with the team, helping get creative ways to how do we get all these containers from Europe with all of our equipment on it here, um, where can I find external support to support the team? Um, Procurement, how do we support procurement? So a lot of that, a lot of, even I'd be out there looking at the cargo trackers to see where the ships were so we could try to help plan better. Or if we saw a port was getting backed up, is there any way we can get offloaded at a different port? Things like that, just to have an idea of what was going on and coming up with backups to backups to backups, if we ran into any small challenge.
Sounds like a major undertaking and requiring a lot of creativity. Are there
It
any
was.
other projects within your career that you're looking back on that you'd like to highlight?
I've had quite a few. When I worked for the design build firm, we did a couple greenfields there. Those aren't, when you start looking at building new manufacturing facilities, those aren't things that companies do every day. So just getting the opportunity to really build three of them in my career, I think is huge. But then even just learning and seeing how different products are made. That's the one thing I love about being with Conagra and being able to get into, several of our different plants. They're all so vastly different and they all pose their own challenges. So, I mean, I've had projects, major projects, with wastewater. Um, and people don't even realize that, you just think in your house, you turn on your sink or you flush your commode or something like that, and it just goes down to the drain and it goes somewhere. Well, when you're dealing with the big vegetable processing facilities, that's not how it works. You have to figure out how to dispose of your own wastewater, the wastewater coming from the plant. So we have pretty big lagoons and spray fields. I never even knew of that concept before. But I have a really good education in it now. I've learned, kind of the hard way in some instances, but those were some projects that were kind of a labor of love, but I've learned a lot on them. Um, and so that was a whole other experience for me. The green fields, were obviously great experiences, but then just the regular day-to-day smaller projects that the plants do, they pose different challenges. And how do you execute a project while keeping a manufacturing facility running? Um, Sometimes it's pretty easy, sometimes it's not so easy. So I got a lot of experience in that and coming up with creative ways to do it. And when I take a step back and think about my career, when I first started out to where I'm at today, I'm like, I would I it just amazes me how much I've learned and how much I've grown. And I'm like, man, when I first started out, I would have never known how to do this. And I would have been in panic mode. And now, it's like, oh, well, okay, take a step back. You can do this. And how I come up with things sometimes still amazes me. But I also have a great team. I can't take all the credit. I do have a great team that I work with, and they keep me grounded. And anytime there's a challenge, we all pull together and we figure it out together as a team.
And that's actually a great segue into my next question. As a woman in engineering, as a leader in engineering, can you think of
Mhm.
any examples of how you felt particularly supported? Or alternatively, do you have any suggestions for how, someone in your position could be supported more fully?
Sure, a couple of things. So, like I said, I mentioned I have a great team. The one thing that I really do like about Conagra, and this has been different from some of my other roles and other companies that I worked for, is we really do work cross-functionally. And we really do have a support network within Conagra. So, if I'm not sure how to do something, there's somebody within Conagra that I can reach out to, um, and do that. And whether it's R&D or it's quality or it's another technical subject matter expert, and we can pull together and, there's no bad idea. We can sit there and throw darts at a wall and come up with something, and there's no bad idea, and we'll work together as a team to figure out, okay, what is the best idea? And maybe there's multiple ones, and how do we tackle that? And how do we bring it to resolution? So that's one thing, that has worked really well for me. Conagra also has different employee resource groups that help just everybody in general, whether you're a leader or you're an up and coming engineer. um, and some of the groups that I'm involved in is like the Women in Supply Chain group, and then there's also um, the women resource group. So you got one in supply chain, and then just kind of the overall women resource group, and we have different things. So we just finished as part of one of the groups. We just finished a book club. We did one for the spring. We're going to look to do one in the fall, but just on, okay, what's important to the group. And the first topic that was probably the biggest for the group was personal growth and growth in our career. So, got a book that we read over the course of, I want to say, 10 weeks or 12 weeks, something like that. And we had a book club meeting every other week where we reviewed those chapters, we shared, we set goals for ourselves to help us grow. So that's one thing that really helped me. And then I'm also very involved in, we have an engineering development associate program where we look to bring in engineering interns over the summer. And they work in our manufacturing facilities and they get a lot of experience. Some of them, we offer opportunities to come back upon graduation in a full-time role. And we also look to, hire from, just the outside to fill those roles. And we take on a few of those every year. So I'm heavily involved with that. I co-partner with one of my peers, and I'm also a mentor for several of our engineering development associates. So, and I enjoy that. It helps. I can share my experiences with them and help them grow, and they bounce ideas off of me. And one thing, that I found that has helped me throughout my career, and I see it help them as well a little bit, is how would you handle this situation? If a situation comes up, it could be, hey, you have a difficult work associate that you have to work with, and how do you get them to align and move forward so it's not as adversarial? You always have one of those that you need to work through, or you know just a difficult, hey, I don't know what decision I should make on this project. How should I move forward? Is this something I should escalate? And bounce ideas off of each other. And I try to encourage them, when they have a problem, come with the problem, but then also think through how they think they would handle it, and we'll talk through that. So it's not like just coming with a problem and no solution. Think through what your solution would be. We'll talk through it. Maybe it will work, maybe it won't, or maybe we need to make a little, tweak to it. but it helps them grow and it helps starting them thinking more broad versus just, narrow.
Sure. And building on this idea of mentorship, do you have any general advice for women who are thinking of entering engineering or are just getting started?
Um, I would, if they're not into college yet and they're just exploring, I would definitely. A lot of the colleges today have Engineers Day or Women in Engineering Day. I would definitely recommend if they can join in on some of those. It gives you a lot of information so you can see what it's about. If there's someone that you know that you can shadow for a day or two, or even ask questions and pick their brain, just to give you an idea of what you're going to be going through, and is it right for you? Because engineering, I'm going to be honest, it's a sacrifice, especially going through college. Some people may be able to breeze right through. I haven't met them yet, if they and they would be my hero if they could. But it is definitely a sacrifice through college, but then you do see the rewards afterwards. And then once you graduate college and you get in the workforce, I would definitely recommend finding a mentor if you can, whether it's with your current company or it's out in the industry. There's several different groups and societies that you can join as an engineer. For me, there was the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, there's the Women's Society of Engineering. So there's different groups out there that you can join and get mentors from. It doesn't necessarily have to be at your company, but obviously, if you can find one in your company, that will help you navigate within your current company, within your current role, and they would have an understanding of how to help you grow. The other thing that I would really recommend, that I'm big on, is to put together, whether you do it yourself or with your current manager, put together an individual development plan. That's something that we're big on at Conagra, and use it to help you get to the next step. So when you think about what your next step is, okay, what experiences, what skill sets do I need to have to get to that next step? And put that in your plan and work with your manager to gain those experiences. So that when it comes time for promotions, you have the experiences and you can be promoted. Or if you're a little further along in your career and an opening happens and you want to apply for that opening, you have the experiences needed. It's like, well, hey, you already have everything it takes to do the job, so it's kind of a no-brainer to put you in the job. But your career is your career, so you have to be responsible for it, you have to own it, you have to drive it. Nobody else will for you.
That's certainly true. And, flipping the roles a little bit, do you have suggestions for more experienced engineers for taking on a mentee?
Yes, I would definitely recommend it, but it is time consuming. So make sure that you only take on the mentees that you can adequately do justice by them. And that was some of the challenges that I had early on. I took on too many. And then it became very time consuming, and I was like, well, okay, how do I do my day job, but then mentor all these people, and be able to answer their questions and do right by them? And I finally had to, back off and say, I can't take on anymore. Let me work through these. Let's get them moving forward, and then we can have that conversation again. But then when you have a mentee, a lot of times it's because they are early on in their career and they don't know what questions to ask. So make the conversation comfortable, make them feel safe, make them feel that what they're going to share with you is going to stay with you. It's not going to be, spread throughout the organization. And that will help them confide in you more, maybe tell you what some of their fears are or what some of their struggles are, so that you can help them and guide them through what next steps would be. And then think about, how do you help them grow? a lot of times they're not going to come to you and say, hey, I have this individual development plan and here's where I want to go. So you have to start kind of pulling that information out of them, and get them to start looking more towards the future versus today.
Certainly. And in your experience with, you know, people early on in their career and of course building your own career, why do you think
Mhm.
it's important or to have, gender diversity or diversity overall within the engineering space?
I think it's really important because you get a lot of different ideas, people that come from different backgrounds, and it doesn't have to be, any, race, ethnicity, gender, anything like that. Just overall, people come from very different backgrounds and they have very different ideas that they can bring to the table. And what I find a lot of times is that there is not one right solution to any problem. Um, so the more ideas that you can bring to the table, the better it is, and you will get to the best solution.
And as you continue on in your career, and as we continue toward the future, is there anything that you'd like to see happen within the engineering space?
I would love to see more women get into engineering, bring more, diversity to it, and just watch it grow. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and just seeing the field grow over the past, really since COVID. It has been getting more difficult to find talent, find people in engineering, find people that have the skill sets that we're looking for. And, and it really goes both ways, both men and women, just in STEM fields, in general, that more and more people are, they don't seem to be going towards them. So just getting them in those fields, getting the knowledge, getting the education, and seeing where they can take the world.
Absolutely. And looking at my list here, I think those are all the questions I had. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on that we didn't already discuss?
I think you pretty much covered it pretty well.
Well, thank you again so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This has been incredibly insightful.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed it.